What could possibly be so important that the British establishment would risk nuclear escalation, global chaos, and the future of humanity itself? Well, here's what most people think. Ukraine's latest drone attacks are about defeating Russia. The headlines scream about bombers hit, bridges damaged, but if you dig deeper, you'll find something far more dangerous and far more revealing. Because the real target is not Moscow, it's Washington, and more specifically, it's the man in the White House who is finishing the unfinished business of the past 250 years. Here's what they don't want you to understand. The British Empire never really ended. It's just changed tactics. And right now, they are so terrified of Donald Trump's second term that they're willing to risk everything, including World War III, to stop him. This is Susan Kokinda. I've been fighting this since the 1970s. While most battled the obvious, I was showing the hand of the CIA in the coup against Nixon and trying to stop the British-directed takedown of our economy. And I was building the political forces to defend our republic. I recently became Coalition's vice chair of the Michigan Republican Party, and I can tell you that what is happening now is different. Trump isn't just challenging their specific policies. He's committed to dismantling their entire system. And if you understand that and help, he's going to succeed. So today I'm going to show you exactly how the British are orchestrating this escalation, why they're so desperate to stop Trump, what his economic revolution really means, and how we can finally finish the American Revolution that started in 1776. So let's start with what happened this week. Ukraine launched Operation Spiderweb, massive drone attacks deep into Russian territory. On June 1st, bombers and railroad villages were hit, killing 7, and that was followed by other attacks. Now, Foreign Policy magazine, which is not exactly a bastion of Trumpism, featured an excellent interview with George Beebe, a former director of Russian analysis for the CIA. After he pointed out that these attacks do cross Russian red lines because they strike at Russia's nuclear triad, and that under Russia's revised nuclear doctrine, that is a potential trigger for nuclear war. But then Bibi hit it exactly when he said, "So I think the Ukrainians' target audience for this operation was here in Washington, not in Russia." Think about that. Ukraine launches attacks that could trigger nuclear war, not to defeat Russia, but to force Trump's hand, to box him in, to make it politically impossible for him to negotiate peace. Now, the administration did come out hard yesterday with a public statement from the White House Press Secretary Leavitt, who said unequivocally that Ukraine did not consult the United States in advance. And a not-so-subtle signal when it was announced that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth will not attend a military aid group with 50 other foreign military leaders to coordinate aid to Ukraine. The U.S. created this group, and this is the first time we're not attending. But how did we get here? Who's really pulling the strings? Where might Operation Spider's Web have been cooked up? Look at the timeline. Back in February 2024, the British Defense Ministry announced that they would be joining Latvia in a partnership to produce and increase the delivery of first-person view drones to Ukraine, the very FPVs that were used on Sunday. And this was right around the time that Ukraine began planning Operation Spider's Web. But why February 2024? Because that's when Donald Trump was consolidating the Republican nomination for president. The writing was on the wall. Trump was coming back, and the British establishment was panicking, and they needed options. But go back even further to December 2018, during Trump's first term, when the British House of Lords published a major report on foreign policy that said, in no uncertain terms, the British could survive one term of Donald Trump, but not 2. The report extolled globalization, liberal democracy, and the rules-based international order. In other words, the empire's modern-day operating system. They knew that Trump was a mortal threat to that system, and their worst fears have now been realized. Trump, against all odds, got a second term, and he's already shaken the world. His shock front of executive orders on everything from tariffs to energy production to the Golden Dome signals a complete assault on decades of globalist free trade and deindustrialization policies. He's made diplomatic breakthroughs in the Mideast, tamped down a war between India and Pakistan. He's pushing forward on a potential deal with Iran. And most terrifying to the British, he's brought Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table. No wonder the British have thrown caution to the winds. King Charles himself met with Zelensky in March of 2025. The British newspaper The Independent said, the decision to invite Zelensky to Sandringham is the most overtly political act the king has made since succeeding Queen Elizabeth. His mother went to great lengths to keep out of politics. Well, actually, she went to great lengths to keep publicly out of politics. And just weeks later, Charles was in Canada rallying our neighbor to the north against Trump. Now, if you're watching this and you're tired of being lied to, if you want to see the real story behind the headlines and be part of a movement to finish the American Revolution, make sure you're subscribed and join us at Promethean Action, because we're building a community of people who refuse to play by the old rules. Now, this isn't just about Ukraine. There is something deeper here. The British aren't just afraid of Trump's foreign policy. They're terrified of what he's doing to the American economy. Why? Because Trump is doing what no one thought possible. He's reviving the American productive identity. Look at steel. Trump just spoke in Pittsburgh after negotiating the historic U.S. Steel Nippon merger that will save that iconic American company. For decades, Washington's embrace of the British free trade dogma has cost Pittsburgh over 100,000 steel jobs. Between 2000 and 2016, more than half of all jobs in Pittsburgh's mills vanished. And as Trump said, if you don't have steel, you don't have a country. But now he's negotiated the largest investment in the history of the American steel industry. $14 billion from Nippon Steel, $2.2 billion going directly to the Mon Valley Works, and another $7 billion to modernize mills in other states. These just aren't numbers on a spreadsheet. These are real, good-paying jobs for Americans, the kind of jobs that free trade was making extinct. But listen to it in the words of a steel worker who spoke at Trump's rally. He said, "When I started at U.S. Steel, my supervisor told me, 'Kid, what are you doing here? Do you think this mill will be here? Look at Homestead. Look at Duquesne. They're not here. You're wasting your time.' But now, years later, I can stand here and think about our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren that are going to have family-sustaining, good-paying jobs, all because of President Trump. This is what terrifies the British and their Wall Street allies, not just the jobs, but the spirit of hope and pride that they kindle. A society where one income can raise a family. Because if America revives its productive identity, if we invest in our own people, then the days of the British-led globalization are over. And Donald Trump is taking this on every front. Every time I speak about the need to return manufacturing jobs to the U.S., the very first thing that people raise is the lack of skilled workers. Well, Trump and team are on the case. Trump recently signed an executive order to foster the creation of 1 million skilled trade jobs in the United States. And when he was in Pittsburgh, he said he would like to divert money used by British outposts like Harvard, and instead, I'd like to see the money go to trade schools, where people learn how to fix motors and engines, where people learn how to build rocket ships, because somebody has to build those rocket ships. This is the real American Revolution, a nation that produces, that builds, that creates, not one that just speculates and consumes. But look, the danger is not just external. The real sabotage is coming from within, from the same neocons, free traders, and globalists who have been undermining our country for decades. Look at Lindsey Graham and Mike Pompeo. Both were in Ukraine at the same time, just before Operation Spider's Web was launched. Graham and Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal met with Zelensky. Pompeo was over in Odessa at a Black Sea summit pushing for more escalation, more war. Graham was telling Zelensky that he has the backing of 80 senators who are pushing for a bill that would impose massive sanctions on Russia if the president judges that Russia isn't negotiating in good faith. So why is Graham still slithering around the Senate? Why does he have any latitude at all? And as some are asking, why isn't he in jail for undermining the president's foreign policy? Because Trump needs him to help shepherd the big, beautiful bill through Congress, a bill that is vital to Trump's revolution. Now, is there crap in that bill? Of course there is. We haven't made it to political paradise yet. And Trump is dealing with Democrats, rhinos, and neocons, and the courts, all of whom are identifiable enemies. But he's also dealing with what I call trinos, Trumpers in name only, as well as actual political allies who simply don't understand the American system and think the end-all of economics is cutting the budget. Look at Elon Musk, whose libertarian side got the better of him yesterday. He's not only attacking the big, beautiful bill, but he's now threatening to primary Republicans who vote for it. I hope that as Musk gets back to his most important and world historic task, which is making the breakthroughs that will get us to Mars, he will begin to realize that you actually do have to run the federal government like he does SpaceX. So rather than praising Milton Friedman, he should dust off Alexander Hamilton's reports on public credit and manufacturers. But this is the hand of the British. They killed our Hamiltonian presidents, like Lincoln and McKinley, and they buried the knowledge of the American system, leaving too many patriots in the grip of the Austrian and Chicago schools of economics. Well, it's time to rediscover the American system as Trump has. He doesn't live in the box of British cooked-up ideologies, and he certainly doesn't like people who attempt to box him in, as Zelensky and Lindsey Graham just tried. He's willing to change the game to find new allies at home and abroad. Now, that British House of Lords report gave us a roadmap to those new allies. In the same way they attacked Trump, they also targeted India, Russia, and China, because they know that a four-power alliance between those three countries and the United States could finish off the empire. If Trump wants to get out of the geopolitical box once and for all, he will dump NATO, dump the special relationship, and begin forging such alliances. Now, at home, it's the blue-collar workers, auto workers, like my friend Brian Panabaker, who founded Auto Workers for Trump in 2016, and the steel workers that Trump stood with in Pittsburgh. They represent a critical element of Trump's new Republican Party. So let's bring it home. The British are gambling with World War III, not to save Ukraine, not to defend democracy, but to stop the American Revolution from being finished. But they're too late. The revolution is back. The American people are waking up. Let's finish what we started in 1776. If you're tired of the old games, of loser politics, if you want to be part of something bigger, join us at Promethean Action. In the last few weeks, we've made great leaps in our drive to have 1,000 paying members, which will support our ability to do more broadcasts and rally more people to this fight. So please join as a regular member or make the biggest contribution you can, because the American Revolution isn't over. This has been your midweek update. Thanks for watching.
Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.